an oral history interview conducted for the Witness to War Serving a Nation project at Nauset Regional High School on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. For the sake of this interview, please state your full name and community in which you reside.
Okay, my name is Donald Richard German, and the second part of your question was?
In the community in which you reside.
Okay, I live in Provincetown, Massachusetts.
All right, thank you. So we'll jump right in, and where did you grow up?
I grew up in the Baltimore area, outside of Baltimore, Maryland. Lived there pretty much until I went on active duty in 1998.
And how would you describe your childhood?
Blue collar family, steel worker family. The community I grew up in Dundalk, it was called Dundalk, was Bethlehem Steel was there, General Motors, a lot of blue collar, and we never longed for anything.
Yeah. Were there any specific events that really made you want to join the Army?
Yeah, it's kind of ironic that I joined the Sea Scouts when I was 13. That's the number one thing I wanted to do on my 13th birthday was join the Sea Scouts. And what that really wanted to make me do was join the Navy. And then Vietnam broke out, and I ended up enlisting in the Army National Guard. I was a helicopter crew chief for 6 years. So by that time, I had already spent 6 years in the Army, and in the Army National Guard. And I got out, and it was 5-year break in service before I went back into the Army Reserve in 1977.
So you say you were a helicopter chief? What was that like?
I was a helicopter crew chief. Yeah, helicopter crew chief is the senior enlisted person on a helicopter that takes care of all the maintenance and kind of takes care of everything that's in the back of the chopper, getting passengers off and on and that kind of thing. It was an infantry position.
Do you have any specific memories of duties that you had or events that happened?
Not relative so much to, there's some cool things like, one time the pilot thought he had a fire in the engine compartment because something overheated, and the detector came once and there was a fire, and we dropped about 2,000 feet, but
wow.
We survived. Helicopters can auto-rotate. They can come down without crashing, as long as the rotors and everything's still sound.
That must have been pretty scary, though.
It was. Yeah.
What were your feelings surrounding enlisting and then throughout your service?
I'm sorry, say again?
What were your feelings surrounding enlisting and then throughout your service?
What were my feelings in general throughout my service, you're asking?
Yeah, so I hear that there's definitely some scary moments, but...
Yeah, there are scary moments. There are, are you talking about specifically in any location or?
Overall, really.
Overall, there's always the fear that you're going to have to go into combat, and it wasn't so much like a cowardly fear. It was more you were going to have to go and possibly kill other people. That was our job, and I don't think any of us really relished that, but I think most soldiers really believed that, like I did anyway, and I think most of them that I knew did, that in order for our country to survive and for us to maintain the freedoms that we have here, that we need a strong military for that.
So you served for over 30 years, and was that because you believed that we needed a strong military?
That was a big part of it. I couldn't have served without feeling like I was doing something worthwhile for the country. But when I enlisted in the Army Reserve in 1977, it was a boat unit, and the Sea Scouts when I was 13, remember that? That's where that ties into this. So my Sea Scout experience really made me want to be on the water and wanted me to go to sea. I've always had boats, I've always been around the water, and so I joined the 949 Transportation Company in Baltimore. It was a watercraft unit. They had tugboats, they had a freight ship, and floating cranes and barges and that kind of thing. And I enlisted for 1 year, fell in love with it because it was so much fun and it was good challenges, and I could see myself eventually becoming the captain, what we called skipper, or the technical term is vessel master. My MOS for the last, I don't know, like 20 some years in the Army was as a vessel master. So after the 1 year enlistment was up, I re-enlisted for 6 years. Before that was up, I applied for warrant officer because all of the deck officers in the Army are warrant officers, not regular commissioned officers. I applied for warrant, went to schools and did everything I needed to do to become a deck officer. And then that happened in 1984. And then in 1988, I became an unlimited master, meaning I could run anything, any size, anywhere in the world.
Wow.
And yeah, that sounds pretty cool, but as I've told your dad, that running a big ship is like being an administrator of a big building. Seagoing tugs was more of a challenge because you actually maneuvered more and did a lot more, and you know, still pushing big ships around. So that was pretty cool. That was my favorite thing to do.
Was it like a childhood dream come true?
It was. It really, really was. And what was really cool about it is in 1994, we got a new series of ocean-going tugs. They were 128 feet long, seagoing tugs, and the first one in Baltimore was christened right in Baltimore Harbor, and I was the master of that vessel. And it was really cool because the day of the christening in Baltimore Harbor, there was a Sea Scout ship that happened to be visiting Baltimore Harbor. So I got to go over and talk to them about how, as master of that boat to be christened today, this is where I got my start. So it kind of gave me a chance to go full circle with the maritime field.
Yeah. Would you say that was your happiest memory?
My happiest moment?
Yeah.
Can I interpret that into like the proudest moment? Or is that another question?
No,
Okay.
go for it.
It was probably what I was just talking about. You know, standing on the deck and, you know, all the fanfare with the music and, you know, having all the VIPs, Assistant Secretary of the Army and all these generals and, you know, all coming aboard and saluting me as they came up. That's a pretty cool thing, pretty cool accomplishment. You know, that was pretty cool, but I guess the most rewarding part of my military experience was when I got my unlimited license, because I knew that, you know, I reached the top of the heap as far as licensing goes. So that's a pretty good thing for somebody that's always loved the maritime field.
Was it a tough journey to get there?
Was it a tough journey to get there?
Yeah, to get your license?
It was in a lot of ways. I mean, remember, and I was still in the reserves at that point, so, and I was working full-time for Baltimore County. So I spent a lot of nights up until like 1 o'clock in the morning studying and preparing, and, you know, for several years doing all that kind of thing. So yeah, it was tough, but I loved every minute of it because I was learning things that really appealed to me.
To bring it back around, what would you say the hardest part of serving was?
The hardest part of serving in the military is knowing that there are times when you have to leave your family behind, your loved ones behind. You know, there are times when you don't necessarily, as a soldier, you're sworn to uphold and defend the United States Constitution, to obey the orders of the Commander-in-Chief, for the civilians that are appointed above you, blah, 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 that kind of thing. And sometimes you didn't always agree with the politics of it, like Vietnam, for example. But you knew that when you were there, you were in, you were sworn, you got to do what they tell you to do. So that could be challenging sometimes. That would be difficult, but a good soldier does what they're told to do, and regardless of your personal politics. But leaving the family behind from time to time, that was tough.
What were your emotions surrounding that? What was it like to have to go away from your family?
Well, it was mixed because it was exciting to be getting a vessel ready to go to sea, knowing you were going on a pretty cool journey. But then at the same time, you knew that those loved ones you were leaving behind didn't necessarily share in that joy. Um, so that was difficult. But and then of course just the elements. Anytime you're at sea and you're facing the elements, that can be a challenge as well.
Were there any big storms or scary?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Would you elaborate, describe?
Yeah. You want me to tell you a story? Is that what that?
I
Okay.
love that.
A year before I got my unlimited license, it was I guess that was in '87, I think, October of '87. There was an old tug that I was a mate at that point on this seagoing tug, an old tug that was in Sunny Point, North Carolina. And the crew out of Baltimore flew down to Sunny Point. My job was to make sure the weather was good. Sunny Point, North Carolina is just a few miles up Cape Fear River from the open sea. And Sunny Point is a Navy depot where they load ships, ammo on ships. And I checked the weather, got all the charts together, made sure all the food was on board. That was my job. The weather forecast was calling for 10 to 15, from what I recall, miles per hour, which means breezy but nothing serious. We left port about 5 p.m. By about 9 o'clock, the wind was blowing maybe 25, 30. By 10 o'clock, it was probably blowing 40 constant, and it got up to about 55 constant, 55 miles an hour constant. So by 11, 12 o'clock, we were in seas that were running 18 to 20 feet in a 107-foot tugboat. Now, that sounds like a big boat, but it's not for that kind of wave action. It was an old boat. Murphy's Law came into play. There was a windshield in the front of the wheelhouse. Picture a tugboat, an old tugboat anyway, with the round wheelhouse and that kind of thing in the front. And the window right in the front had a crack in it. So the glass was pretty thick, and as long as it stayed up, no problem. But in order to keep it up, you had to use a thumb screw that would put pressure, rubber stopper that would put pressure on the glass to keep it from sliding down. And they were spring loaded, so they were easy to make them go up. So we got into these heavy seas, and the boat would crash down in a trough between the waves, and the window would come down because we couldn't tighten on it too much because of the crack. A wave would come in. Because of the spring loaded, it would go back up after the wave came in. Seemed kind of funny at first because the timing just was so bad, but we took out all the electrical panel in the back of the wheelhouse. The boat went completely dark. We lost steering. We had all kinds of problems. We were taking on a lot of water. We were in seas that were, like I said, 18 to 20 feet. It was about midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning now, and we got to the point where we I really believed, I think most of the people on the boat believed, that we more than likely would never see the sunrise. And that was probably the most depressing time that I ever felt. But we all got to the point where we just felt like, this is it. There's nothing we can do. We're just going to die. The sea's going to swallow us up. We lost steering, and once that happened, then we were dead in the water, and the boat actually rode better dead in the water. We called the Coast Guard because of the steering. It took them until about 11 o'clock the next morning to get out to us because it was so rough. We were, I forget, maybe 75, 80 miles off Cape Hatteras at that point. They towed us into Morehead City, got in the next morning because it was a slow tow, all that distance and all those waves. I got off the boat and I said, that's it. I don't ever want to do this again. Next week I was back out there again. So, it's in your blood when going to sea. If you really love it, there's pretty much nothing that can keep you from going out there.
Yeah.
So, but that was probably the toughest moment, is believing that we may never see the sunrise again.
So even after that really near-death experience, you still just had it in you to keep going?
Yep.
That's impressive.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you form any friendships while serving, either on the boats or?
Yeah, I still have quite a few friendships actually. Most of them are like through Facebook. They're kind of long distance friendships now because most of the folks I knew were either in the Baltimore area or the Virginia area. Because when I retired from Baltimore County government, I ran a tugboat up and down Chesapeake Bay one winter, ran a water taxi that summer, and then I went on active duty. Stayed on active duty for 10 years until I turned age 60 in 2008. Well, when I went on active duty, I ended up in Virginia for the last 4 years as the Maritime Training and Standards Officer. So that gave me the opportunity to get to know everybody in the maritime field in the Army, and developed a lot of friendships there, but most of them were kind of out from, if you think of it like a network, out from Virginia, Fort Eustis, Virginia, because that was the hub at the time for the Transportation Corps, the part of the service that the watercraft fell under.
Was it difficult to really form friendships when you knew that the people that you were making friends with could go out in a boat and, like the story you described, fear they never would see land again?
Okay, say that again now.
So, was it difficult to make friendships when you knew the people might go out in a boat and never see the light of day again, like in your story?
Probably just the opposite, because to do what I did in the military, just as a lot of jobs in the military are very dangerous, most dangerous part of my job was going to sea. It was not likely I was going to be dealing with enemies shooting guns at me because I was in the Transportation Corps. I was no longer in the infantry like I was when I was a helicopter crew chief. So I think that danger, what we got sea pay. We got special pay for going to sea because of the extra danger of, being out there in the elements like that. But because of that, it created a camaraderie among those of us that did that. We knew we were taking risk every time we went out there for an extended period of time, depending, because we didn't know what the weather was going to be like that far in advance, or what we were going to run into, or what dangers we would, as your dad knows from our work with the harbor master here, I take care of the boat first. To me, the boat is more important than myself, because when I'm out on a boat, if I think of myself first, the boat could kill me. If I take care of the boat could save my life. And that's the way we learn to think when you go to sea, is you take care of the boat first, and then the boat will take care of us. So that kind of creates a camaraderie among the maritime folks.
So would you say that the uncertainty you faced and the difficulties definitely helped shape the person you are today?
Oh yeah, I think it did. I'm afraid you're going to ask me how. You couldn't do the things that you do in the military without it shaping your life, unless you just, if you get into a leadership position in the military, it's got to shape your life. I think probably differently than most of my friends in Provincetown because of my military experience. I take responsibility very seriously. Even if I don't want to, I can't help it. I just do, because you don't spend all that time in the military without knowing you're responsible to other people, and other people, you're responsible for other people as a leader. So that just sticks with you. It becomes part of your personality over time.
Yeah. Has it helped you become more successful, would you say?
No doubt about that. No doubt about that. Did you say in P-Town or just in general?
In general.
In general, yeah.
Well.
It helped me in my career in Baltimore County. The christening that I was telling you about in Baltimore, the director, I worked for Recreation and Parks in Baltimore County, which was a very big system there. and the director was very impressed by, he was invited to the christening. He was very impressed by that whole thing, and that kind of made him pay more attention to what I was doing, because he kind of looked at me as management within the department. And personally, so it wasn't just how others looked at me, but it's how I looked at myself and how I do things. I take responsibility seriously.
Are there any thoughts you'd like to share about your time serving, whether it be on the boat or
In my time in what now?
your time serving, whether it be in Baltimore or
You know, that's a big question, because you know, my husband likes to tell people that I was in the military. You know, to me, it's not quite as important that others know it. He seems to be more proud of it maybe than I am, but you know, I don't know. Ask that again. Let me hear you ask that again.
all right. Are there any other thoughts you'd like to share about your time serving the nation?
Just that I'll tell you how it really impacts me personally. I'm a gay American, as you obviously have a husband, so that's the case. I don't feel like I deserve any more freedoms, any more rights, any more respect than anybody else. But I do feel like, because I've served this country in the capacities that I've served it in, as long as I served it in the military, that I do deserve all the full rights of any other American. And there are parts of this country where that's not the case, because the way I was born as a gay man. And that makes me very bitter in certain places in this country, because there are places where whether or not you served in the military doesn't mean anything. What's important to some people in this country is that I'm a gay man, and because of that, I could lose employment, not in Massachusetts, but in other states. So that probably impacts me more than anything right now, as far as I feel like I've earned my right. Every American is entitled to the full rights of any American. But I think that when you serve in the military for as long as you have, that you, as much as anybody, deserve that. But that's not the case.
Unfortunately. Would you say that your service was ever affected by you being gay, or
Was my service not?
ever affected by you being gay? Was there any
I know. I was very lucky. I hit it well. I never got involved with anybody in the military. I just would not allow myself to do that. It was never really an issue.
Did you find your way to Cape Cod because of your love for boats and the water?
That's part of it. The other part is when we were talking about my emotions as far as being gay and serving in the military and rights, we lived in Georgia before we came here. And I really needed to live in a place where I felt equal as an American. And this was one of the places to do that.
So after you stopped serving, did you go right back to Georgia, or what happened right after?
Did I go back to Georgia?
So did you go to Georgia after you?
I went to Georgia after I retired. My legal home was Baltimore up until 2007, and I had 1 year left on active duty, and my now husband and I had a house built in Georgia as a result of him making a promise to his family to look after his mom, and then when she passed away, that obligation was no longer there, and we got out of Georgia.
What was it like to come back from serving and not have the friends you made still with you?
You mean the friends I made in the military, or?
Both.
Yeah, you know, that's tough. you know, but you always make new friends, and you hold on to some friends, you know, and so that was never really a big issue, because there are some friends that I miss dearly from Baltimore. There are some friends I miss dearly from the military, but the distance is just what it is, you know. You just call, talk to them, and that kind of thing, and hopefully see them again soon.
Yeah, so you say you still stay in touch with them. Has that affected your daily life at all?
I wouldn't say it affects my daily life, but it affects how I think when it's quiet and I'm alone, and you know, and I start missing people that I know.
Yeah. So would you describe your current occupation?
Well, I'm assistant, one of the many assistant harbor masters in Provincetown. It's a seasonal position. Currently on call status. I love what I do because I'm running boats again, and they're small boats, so I feel like I've gone full circle in my maritime field. You know, started with small boats and built up to the large unlimited vessels, and now I'm back running small boats again and loving it.
Nice. Are there any final words of advice or insights you'd like to share?
Not really, other than I would just say that, you know, I think as a military person that it's important that Americans everywhere realize that whether or not you serve, that every American deserves the rights guaranteed to all Americans under the Constitution. And that's why I served. One of the reasons why I served, besides I wanted to be on boats, big boats. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right. Thank you so much for talking with us.
You're more than welcome.